The Dead by James Joyce, possibly the pinnacle of short stories, possibly the greatest short story collection of all time. While we've covered Dubliners in the light of it as a collection, today we're revisiting The Dead as we are celebrating Christmas, and it was actually in a collection for very Irish Christmas stories. I know I wanted to focus on the last two paragraphs. My friend Crypto here wanted to talk about it at Christmas as a whole. But I thought we'd kick tonight off with a quick reading of what is ultimately some of the greatest paragraphs in world literature. Generous tears filled Gabriel's eyes. He had never felt like that himself towards any woman, but he knew that such a feeling must be love. The tears gathered more thickly in his eyes, and in the partial darkness, he imagined he saw the form of a young man standing under a dripping tree. Other forms were near. His soul had approached that region where dwell the vast hosts of the dead. He was conscious of, but could not apprehend, their wayward and flickering existence. His own identity was fading out into a gray, impalpable world, the solid world itself, which these dead had one time reared and lived in, was dissolving and dwindling. A few light taps upon the pane made him turn to the window. It had begun to snow again. He watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling obliquely against the lamplight. The time had come for him to set out on his journey westward. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen, and farther westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling, too, upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Fury lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate, on the barren thorns. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe and faintly falling, like the descent of their last end, upon all the living and the dead.
Ooh, boy, that gets you every time, right? Goosebumps, tears.
And I remember reading this in college, and, half my life ago now, I'm told that this is amazing. I'm told it's great, and I enjoyed it. I don't remember if it was Otterby or if it was this one that we read first. I know we read both, but now having returned to this several times, there's so many things that mean something different to me, which is why I wanted to return to this. And I think the last video we did on this, I think actually you had a lot of connection with, the immortality and the struggle with that. And maybe I just wasn't at that point in my life. I think I hadn't reached 40 yet. Well, guess what? Now I have.
Oh, I'm that much older than you, huh?
Yeah, we see your salt and pepper hair turn before mine.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Just watch the videos.
I'm looking at this now, and I think you maybe had this revelation earlier, but no old intended. But the ending of his own life, Gabriel's life, the ending of Irish culture as they know it, the ending of how everyone has this thing in common, which is a finite existence on this earth, and how the snow can ubiquitously touch everything. It's just so beautiful, the epiphany that Gabriel reaches in this moment on so many different levels. I think not just the mortality, but I think that registered more with me, but also this struggle for connection with others, I would say.
Yes, I was so waiting to go in that direction because I really feel like these last two paragraphs hit home for me now that we're revisiting this, 4 years later, and I've gone through what you already have this time, and now I'm to the point of isolationism. And I think about a lot in our world today, our society today, is communicating, miscommunicating. Am I in this silo all by myself? And I feel like when you're out in the snow like that, it's very easy to get lost. And I think that kind of perpetuates this idea that you're all alone. And that's scary. And I think that it doesn't matter if you're alive or you're dead. Gabriel is finally realizing that this is a journey that we're all going to go through by ourselves. But as long as you communicate that information, that you still have a tether to who you are. And it's a beautiful end to an amazing story, and arguably the greatest collection of short stories ever.
But that's the trick, isn't it? Right? That tether, because we've gone through, I don't know if it's been since the first time we read this story. I think we've gone through this pandemic when we talk about isolationism, at least, right? We've gone through, again, I don't remember when this happened, but, if you think about Robin Williams, when he took his own life, there was that comment. I think it was actually from a script that he read this. Like, it wasn't like he wrote this comment, but it was said by Robin Williams, where he was talking about how you can be in a room with other people and still be the loneliest person there, right? I think that's kind of Gabriel, like this moment of realization where he sees that his wife had this connection with this boy, Michael Fury, and he's connected with him, right? Like the souls of the past are there with him, which I think signifies how we carry the past with us, right? No matter what, like we have this interconnectivity, like the way the snow falls and everything, the way that we have these memories of a boy that died for his wife. And he wonders, can he ever be that man? Like, could he ever do that? Could he ever fulfill that level of passion, yet he still feels so alone and disconnected? You start to kind of question, did I make the right choices in life? Am I at the right place? Am I doing the best that I can? And it's easy to get down on yourself. And I think a lot of people can relate to that with Gabriel, of just almost like a shame of who you are at times.
I agree with everything you said. And I think looking at the story in this last little paragraph versus it, in its entirety, that is true. For me, this time, again, I was trying to have a stint of, a Christmas vibe all the way through the story. It was the ultimate story in a very Irish Christmas. What could I glean from it, looking at it from a lens of, holiday cheer? And for me, when I think about it, to your point of looking back at a childhood crush, a childhood love, or just childhood in general, there's something magical about Christmas for all of us, right? You and I love talking about Christmas. We love Christmas songs. We love Christmas movies. We like dressing up. We like decorating. I like cooking with my wife. But there's something that's even beyond magical for Christmas when you're a child. And I think it locks in those core memories that really define a lot of who we are as a child and how we'll think about things as we are as an adult. And as Gabriel's reflecting back upon that, I don't know if he has those same experiences. I know he doesn't have those same experiences as his wife. And maybe that's the thing that he's struggling with, that when people reflect back upon their own childhood, not traumas, but lack of joy, it's hard to relate. And that can be very difficult in a time when you look across the street and people are bringing in presents and there's food, and you turn into the Grinch. You become a bah humbug, you're Scrooge, and you're like, I didn't have that as a kid. I'll never know what it's like, and I'm mad about it. And Gabriel's struggling with that.
Seems kind of unfair, doesn't it? Right? Like, well,
yeah, right?
Well, I mean, like, you look at A Christmas Carol, and I think it's a beautiful story. We all know that story, but how realistic is it, right? Like, to reach full salvation of yourself, your soul, your joy. If you've lived your entire life in misery, you ain't turning that clock back. Those chains you wove, if we take, the part where he talks about standing next to the ghosts, the past carries with you, at least in this mortal life, right? And when it comes to that immortal life, right, we know James Joyce was not religious at this point in time in his life, right? He had left the faith. And, there's a lot of talk about, like, well, what does it mean? What happens when you die, right? Do you become nutrients? You nourish the earth, and there's a cycle? Does your soul go up into heaven, and there's a possibility of eternal bliss if you reaped what you sow and had a good moralistic life living here, right?
You hope.
How uncomfortable is it to never be able to turn the clock back on a mortal life? If you don't believe in religion, you'll never get back the joy that you missed out in your childhood. You'll never have the connection with your wife that this young boy did that was willing to die with her. How's Gabriel move forward? How does someone find comfort in that situation that doesn't have the idea of rebirth, of salvation, of this eternal life, like it's an incredibly anxiety-ridden situation that I think a lot of people face at certain times in their life.
Multiple times in their life, depending on what they're going through, birth of a child, wedding, loss of a loved one, birthdays. The thing about Christmas is it is yearly, so it's a constant reminder. In our society today, in the United States, it's very commercialized and it lasts a really long time. Your birthday's maybe one day, not a big deal. For some people, or it could be. Again, I'm not trying to, make that, be insensitive about it. But Christmas, like, they start the sales, they start the songs, people start decorating, people get the trees, the tree lots go up. It's in your face for a really long time. That's something that's hard to digest and just push aside, because then you stand out because everybody else is in a good cheer. It's the most wonderful time of year. And so you become this shining beacon of negativity, and then you're even more doubly so in hard for people to deal with if you aren't, why aren't you happy? Why aren't you having fun? Well, why being such a bah humbug? It doubles downs on it, and that's tough for people. So yeah, I mean, Gabriel's in a tough spot, and I think a lot of people can relate to that if they didn't have the perfect childhood or such a positive or negative traumatic event wrapped around Christmas-esque time period.
Well, and it could be the traumatic event, the haunting nature of it, but it's how do you use it? How do you frame it? Because I do think there is a certain amount of power in how people frame trauma and how they frame stories, right? It can be something that defines you, but it could also be something that either prevents you from moving forward, the fear and the pain of having to relive it, but it can also be something that propels you forward, right? Trauma has a purpose, I think, psychologically, to remind us not to go down certain ways, to avoid certain decisions because of all the pain we faced. It might motivate or drive us to live better, right? So I'm one of those people that believe that we carry the past with us. I don't think it's a hard sell when we look at the interconnective systems, what we inherit politically, socially, emotionally, financially from our parents in years past, from our country, our nationalistic standings. There's so much we inherit in life, right? And you have to take the past with you, but you have to frame it correctly. You may not ever have that perfect life. You may not ever have been born in the perfect circumstance, but how you use that to drive you, to push yourself into the correct moment, into the correct mindset that will drive out, I think, the most happiness, is one of the most powerful things that I think Gabriel is going through at this point in time. He's realizing the trauma. He's seeing the boy under the dripping tree, right? He's carrying that past trauma with him. But now what's interesting and why Dubliners is so fascinating is how Joyce cuts it off at this moment. And this is the critical moment, I think, for Gabriel to either be paralyzed by it in traditional Dubliner, do-nothing Dubliners fashion, or to use it to motivate himself to live a more connected life with his wife, I would hope.
I think also we can look beyond just the last two paragraphs, which are, of course, beautifully written as we just discussed them, but to the rest of the story as well. This is not a one instance for Gabriel. I think we look at the rest of the story beyond just the rest of Dubliners. In the Dead, he's struggling with the whole night. He struggles in the beginning talking. He's struggling with the dancing. He's struggling with the singing. He doesn't, I don't know, he's not necessarily like an introvert, like he doesn't want to be there, but he just doesn't find what is his place there. He again, he feels that isolation. He feels separated. And as we look at the story in its entirety, and we look at Dubliners in its entirety, Joyce does this amazing job, almost perfect job, you could argue, that you have this separation of the living and the dead, and Gabriel doesn't know where he fits in. His soul is lost, and that's what he's trying to look to find, I think, is where does he fit. And this story is not a sad ending, but it is an ending, so to speak. I mean, it's literally the ending of the book in Dubliners and this book that we read. But I hope it's not the end for Gabriel.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that is a very haunting way to look at it. Let's say you're doing a puzzle. Okay. You've got
How many
one
pieces?
piece, 1,000. I'm giving you the hard one, right? I used my entire vacation to do this puzzle. There's a certain point where people want to know the answer. Like if you have 999 placed and you have one piece left, you know exactly where it goes. You know which direction to put it, and you know when you put it in, it fits, right? You're like, this is the right place for it, right? Now, take a couple 100 steps back, even in the 200, the 300 pieces place, or even when you're first starting, putting a piece down, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fragility in knowing that this is going to be wrong, that you don't know what you're doing, you don't know where you're going. I almost view that kind of like what it's like for Gabriel with how he fits in, right? He feels like everything he's doing is not good enough. There's like this, I mean, you have to admit, in the human experience, there's a lot of emotional fragility to put yourself out there. Think back to when you were a single man, just to be like, I like you, like to a girl. Like that is an incredibly difficult thing to just do, to wrap your mind around.
Everest. Yeah.
It's this weakness that we have about, I'm a puzzle and society is the picture, right? Language and emotions are the systems in which we find out where does our puzzle piece fit. But we're too afraid to use the language and the emotions in Gabriel sometimes to resonate with someone, to find out, are you in the right spot? You'd rather just not know than in a dyad between a marriage between a man and a woman, to open yourself up to that vulnerability and find out you were wrong. You'd rather just not finish the puzzle and just give up. And I think that's reality. It's scary. It's sad. But I think a lot of us feel that way sometimes when we're trying to figure out that language of where do I fit into society.
The thing of it is, for me, Gabriel has to admit not only to his wife, but he has to admit to himself his vulnerability and his lacking of, I may not live up to what your expectations are of Michael, of what he did. And Gabriel wants to, but if he doesn't, that's heartbreaking. And I think, to your point, sometimes doing things for the ones we love is twice as hard for the ones that we don't even know.
It's amazing how Joyce writes this throughout the whole piece, right? I have a lot of actually concrete quotes I was going to go through, but I found our conversation more interesting than the quotes I had saved here. But there were lots of parts throughout this where Joyce wrote, when he was waiting on his wife, he said it takes her 3 mortal hours to get ready, right? And the fear when they're getting ready to leave, the way that she caught a cold and was near death. Again, the way that wind and nature brought in kind of like death into our lives, like a reminder. There's a lot of things that Joyce does along the way that you and I have talked about, the psychological, the fragility of our relationships, the historical interconnectedness that we have. And to say it's as weak and gentle as a snowflake and as available to everyone around us is why I think this really is just one of the most beautiful these 2 paragraphs are the most beautiful passages in all of literature. And also, I think Joyce himself, when you read his biography and such, he had a lot of frustrations when it comes to connectivity and such with others. And I think the way you see him express that through all of Dubliners, right? If you look at Arby and Evelyn, with the way that they had failures to connect. We're in the process right now of reading Ulysses, right? Think about Leopold Bloom and Molly, right? Like there's an incredible failure in the human capability yet desire to complete that puzzle piece. And it's just so out there and available for everyone and how we're all connected. But it's just, yeah, I'm going to say, I think this might be the greatest short story ever written. I'll just say that now.
Ooh, bold claim. I don't know. Maybe. maybe there's some other really great short stories out there.
There are. It's obviously our channel having over like, I don't even know how many we have now, probably like 600 videos, of which probably a good 450 are short stories. I still, from day one that I've read this, what's interesting is how the story has opened up further and further the more I've read it. In the same way that like a connection with someone, the more and more you and I talk and get to know each other, the more you talk to your wife and get to know her, the more you talk to some coworker that you just met, like we unravel the onion each and every time. And perhaps I'm just getting closer to the center of the onion with the story, but it's connecting with me more each time I read it.
That's fair. And I will give you that it definitely is a contender, and it could potentially knock off Harrison Bergeron is the greatest short story ever.
Oh, I thought you
I
like
know.
the shot the best. You waffle. You
Yeah, I mean sometimes it's Flannery, sometimes it's Baldwin.
Okay, let's put it this way.
I don't know.
Too.
I'm all over the place. So
let me continue my analogy here. You ready for this one? Sometimes a puzzle piece will actually fit into multiple puzzles.
Oh, that's pretty deep. Oh, dang.
And that must be the ending of the chat here. Thank you for spending time with us today. What's your favorite short story of all time? And even if you did not find The Dead as the most compelling, hopefully we've opened up. Maybe the story didn't become more compelling to you. That's not the point I have here. My point is to relate why I think the story draws out a lot and how connected it is to, I think, the human condition. So if that helped you in any way, let us know in the comments down below. It means a lot to me and it means a lot to the algorithm. Thank you for spending time with us today. Peace.
Happy holidays.